is his birthday.
Welcome on for me, an auspicious day. I can't say the word properly at the moment. I've got new teeth in. Bear with. On this auspicious day, which happens to be my birthday, yes, and thank you. We are here doing IPSA Kind of Magic. IPSA Kind of Magic, the Association of Independent Property Personal Search Associates. Oh my goodness, giddy aunt. I'm giddy with happiness. And we have here today, of course, Hamish McLay, the current chairman of said organ of Search and Convey, Jackie Dyson, expert, specialist and supporter, as well as a founder member, now a consultant, and of course, Val Bennett, a current member of IPSA. And thank you all for attending. As ever, we often talk about things that affect what a personal search agent will come across or deal with. And today is no different. Today's topic is when property records tell a different story or tells different stories. And to start us off, as is traditional, Hamish McLay.
Well, yes, it's glorious sunshine, I think, throughout the...
Huzzah to that. Huzzah.
Which is good. It's a shame here we sat inside, not able to go out and visit those lovely councils that we all used to sort of go out and visit. One of the sad things about that, of course, it does have an impact on the relationship we have with the councils. And the great advantage of actually going into the council is when we see the information there, we can actually sort of discuss with the land charges officer or anybody if there's something we feel slightly wrong. Because now and again, it doesn't quite look right for some reason or other. These days, of course, we don't even get the chance to look at the records ourselves. A lot of the time, we're relying on the council doing it sort of as quickly as they can because they're short of staff these days. They haven't got the full staff to actually work on it. And what happens occasionally, which makes it very, very difficult, these aspects we've spoken about, the complication of adding councils together, losing the experts, and it's very, very easy for incorrect information to land up on the pile. I mean, for example, if we actually have things like land charges, the land charges records should agree, particularly with planning, of what goes on with planning. And sometimes there's a discrepancy. The planning department holds certain things which land charges don't have, or it'll be the other way around. And it's very often, it's very hard to find out if there is something wrong there. But it's only by looking at it very carefully and understanding what is happening with the records, the way the different records are held. And unfortunately, though, if you're not actually had the experience of going into the councils, it does actually restrict the amount of visibility you can sort of find yourself when you're actually looking at things. It will be evident to when we actually sort of look, and it's a worrying thing. If you added up the number of years that I've been working in this particular business arena, I mean, it's a darn sight less than either of the two that are joining us. But the long-term experience demonstrates that those records do actually conflict sometimes. And it's obvious to us when it does happen. However, the two who've joined us today, both Val and Jackie, have worked with this, not just this century, it's their last century as well. But I think discrepancies, that everything was very simple at one particular time. It's become much more complicated. So somebody who sat at a desk who's never walked into Oxford to carry out the search doesn't actually sort of know the way those records are kept. So if they're sat in Southampton or they're sat in Liverpool, what do they know about Oxford? Whereas a local person going in there, a personal search agent, as we call them, they are regulated searches, of course, but there is a big difference between that. But it's finding these things out that is the difficulty, and understanding if there are challenges, if they are incorrect. We noticed a similar type of thing, in fairness, with many of the unqualified conveyancers that actually have come into the school. The less they know, the more difficult the more difficult they find to actually get through things. And it's much the same as somebody who's not actually had the experience of going into a council office. I mean, many solicitors, for example, are they themselves don't fully understand what in fact goes on within a sort of land charge, within a sort of full search. So it's an interesting thing altogether, really. But let's pass on to the experts who've been around for all those years working at. It's no reflection of the age, of course, but it's just the length of time they've worked. They've worked in these things. Unlike Gareth, of course, who knows absolutely nothing about them. But he's learning. He's learning.
I am learning. I'm steep learning curve. Jackie Dyson, thank you so much for being here today. You must have some hair-raising stories to tell.
Well, not hair-raising, but things.
Or you can do your best.
Yeah, things that occur regularly. That, as I said the other week on the podcast, that the amount of information that land charges have to register now, things aren't done as they should be. They're not done as quickly as they should be. And I don't know about Val, but the most common mistake I come across, or the misinformation, is that you'll check highways and it'll say the road's adopted. And then you'll do a land charges search and it'll say there's a Section 38 adoption agreement. And you think, well, which is right? So then you have to either email the council or ring the highways department, find out what date it was adopted, and if it actually is adopted, get that in writing if you possibly can, to say when it was, and then possibly contact your local land charges and tell them this is now being adopted, this should be removed. And usually they'll say, well, we weren't informed. And that is the problem. Other departments don't inform other departments quicker enough, or they forget to do it. I mean, many years ago, properties used to get housing grants to do, or disability grants, where they could put a ramp in, an extension. And some of these grants lasted 5-10 years. I mean, even just not long before I finished, I was coming across housing grants that were 25 years out of date, that should have been removed from the register. And nobody has informed the council. And if that house hasn't had a search done on it via the land charges, then they don't know that it has to be removed. I mean, they can't go through all their records to think, we need to take this off, we need to take that off. They rely on other departments informing them. And sometimes, a lot of times, that communication breaks down. Right. Also, there's many times I've come across, I've done the planning search, I've done the land charges search, and then I click onto the email or the websites, and it brings up a planning application I've not seen, and think, what's this? And I've known it to be a planning application, not be registered on the property, but on the whole council area. So every search you did, this planning application came up, and you're thinking, how the heck has that happened? You get to know those sort of things. Val's probably got more as much as I have, that she comes across regularly, that things of misinformation, that one department says this and another department says that. So then you have to start digging.
All right. Well, that's my key to pass across to the Honourable Val Bennett. Thank you very much for coming to the show. Can you give us some edifying stories? That's all. Give us pause.
I can always find an odd story or two, definitely.
Love that, Val. Love that.
One that only occurred a couple of weeks ago, actually. Trying to think which Wirral Council it was. Not to shame Wirral, I'm sorry. And it was actually the client came back to us, the solicitor, and said, you've given us a building regs decision. You put it in, and yeah, that's fine, except it's not ours. It should be somebody else's. So I was like, oh my gosh, I go into a bit of a panic then, going, oh my God, what have we shown you that's wrong, you know, because obviously I always think we're wrong before anything else. So I have a look and I go onto Wirrell's building regs and I put in the address because they've said, we think it's another road with the same name in a different area in the borough. So we think you've got the wrong one. Our postcode is this and their postcode is that. So I then go onto the building regs and I go, no, we've given you the correct one that they're saying on the building regs. They're saying it belongs to, I don't know, 10 High Street West CH48. And everything agrees and it's all there. And I go, no, we're not wrong. We're giving you what the council have said and what is on their site. And they went, yeah, that's fine. But there's a problem in that this application was for a lounge extension to the side of the house.
Right.
We're a mid-terrace. I was like, oh.
Classic.
Oh, right. And then I look at the plan, then I go, yeah, you definitely are a mid-terrace. And they go, we've never had a lounge extension, and we certainly haven't got a lounge extension to the side of the dwelling.
Not unless you're going to buy the house next door to you. Yeah. Sure.
So I've then gone back and go, oh, yeah. Oh, because we haven't spotted it, because obviously we're not going, is this house detached? Is this house this, that, and the other?
Well, no, you wouldn't.
Does the application agree? I mean, it'd be nice if we had the time to do that with every address. But because we're not going to look into it, we just go, the address is correct, the postcode is correct, and there's what the details of this application were for. So we had to kind of go, you're going to have to get the solicitor or the person selling to go back to the council to say, this is on your site and it's not ours.
Is this another classic case where you have to adjust the actual records to reflect?
Well, they're going to have to go back 25 years because this is not a recent application. It's something from about 20 years ago. They're going to have to dig back, find the original plans, the original request to see exactly which address it should be, because at the moment that house has got that and somehow somewhere else is missing this building regs information. So that was something that only came up literally a couple of weeks ago. And then I remember another one that was in Manchester. I mean, I'm going back a lot of years, and it was in Harper Hay district, and it was a new build development. And I'm going back to when it was in the 90s. And it turned out that in fact, my dad was still working then, so it was something that he dug into. I do recall that. And it was a development of 77 houses built by whichever big developer it was. The only problem was there were 78 houses on this site. So the planning application was only ever for 77, and there were specifically 78. I remember we brought it up with the planning department and said, you've got a house missing. They built one more house than they had permission for. And they were like, well, there's nothing we can do about it now. It's always going to stay like that. That's it. End of the 78 with an application for 77. Probably nobody else has ever realised it. It would only be my dad that ever would have known something like that. So
does that potentially cause problems in the future?
Well, it could. There is a house sitting there that's never had permission to be built. But as for which one it is, that's probably never going to be known. Because I think it was a development in the early 90s. And they're not going to go back and ask the developer for the money for one more house, you know. So that developer might not even...
By the same token, say that one house has to be demolished.
Well, they could do, I guess. Yeah, they could do. But I doubt that they're going to. But yes, in theory, they could. So that's a very sort of a strange one. And then obviously nowadays as well with HMLR, our land charges details obviously all comes online because we go onto the HMLR and we edge our property and it gives us the information. So, but what happens now, because obviously we have to just take that as read, we don't have a way of querying that, or if we don't want to doubt it, we just take it. But what's happening recently now is that when the council realizes it's made a mistake, it then has to notify HMLR, who then have to go through the system and see who has requested a search on a property or on an area. They then have to email everybody that's made any of those requests and then tell them to search that property again because they believe that there is a missing or a incorrect entry. So, and then, you know, this has happened a few times, particularly with Article 4s, that the council hasn't revealed that there now is an Article 4 for an area or for a whole council, and that might have been missing for 3 months. And if we don't know about it, we were told, or we haven't inquired into, look, you know, checking things, then we get told 3 months later, and then we then have to go through all our searches and then notify all the clients that this was a missed off entry. So that happens as well. One more before I get moved off. I know there was another one. It was Wirral again, and this was only a few weeks ago. They emailed us directly, and
Wirral again.
Wirral again.
Should we be told something?
I know they're not HMLR yet, and they went, "We're really sorry. We know you've done a search on this property, and we should have told you that it was in a conservation area, and we didn't. And this is an extension of a conservation area, so the UDP maps and the local plans, they don't show it as being in a conservation area because they're still the old plans. So we ended up telling somebody that, oh, it backs onto a conservation area, but it's not in it. And now we have to go, actually, it is in it. So we're very sorry, because obviously that's really important to somebody buying, because if they have a tree in their front garden that they've just knocked down when they bought the house, that is against big problem then, because nobody told them it was in a conservation area. So those sorts of things do and will always happen, and there's lots of stories. I remember one of yours, Jackie. Was there something about a listed building once that wasn't revealed? I seem to have it in my mind that you told a story once.
Oh God.
It was to do with a non-revealed listed building. I think it was the gate posts were listed even though the property wasn't, or something, and nobody had.
What?
Yep, gate posts can often be listed. Railings can often be listed because during the war, obviously a lot of railings were taken away to use the metal to use for building aeroplanes, etc. And sometimes after that, some councils that had got some left actually listed them. And the thing is, though, what you've got to look at is that the land charges should have it listed. But one of the questions for planning is also that it's listed. So therefore, but sometimes it has been missed on both. But then you can check. There are places to check, which we do. I mean, there's the English Heritage site. And also, again, local knowledge when you look at something, because you think, that's an old property. Could there be some form of listing on it? So you might dig a bit more. But yes, gate posts can be, say, railings. There's all sorts. I mean, I've had one that a dovecot was listed, so within the garden. So I mean, there's all sorts you could pick up. So it is. But it's the thing is, as Val said, she mentioned HMLR. The thing is, if they're not kept up to date, it is because we know land charges aren't kept up to date. So how the heck a land registry will be kept up to date? 100%, which they should be. But again, people in other departments, if they've not been taught right, when this happens, you're supposed to inform land charges, right? Okay. If they're not told, then they don't do it. So it's knowledge. It is local knowledge. And
you wouldn't get that from, say, a factory conveyancing outfit, because they wouldn't have that local knowledge.
No. It is. It's learn. I mean, at the moment, I'm in the middle of checking people that have applied to join the IPSA, and I'm checking some of their searches. And I'm going on the sites of these councils that I've never worked in before, and you think, my God, this is a minefield. It's not the same as like where Kirklees and Calderdale. I could just go on and go bum 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 bum. That search is done because I knew exactly where I was going. I mean, I'm looking at Herefordshire and Worcester. I apart from Hungerford and the SAS are down there somewhere, I know very little about Herefordshire. I've also got one, funny enough, for Hertfordshire. And funny enough, one of the addresses is near where I grew up. So I've got to contact Hertfordshire Building Control, because some of the councils in Hertfordshire come under one building control. And I want to know how they get that information. So it's the local knowledge of knowing your council area. And as Hamish says, we can't, or we can no longer speak to the workers and build up those relationships that we used to have.
Oh, well.
So it's
Hamish, it reminds me, do you remember Jasper Carrot, Carrot Confidential?
Mhm.
I remember one of them particularly. Yesterday, I reversed my car into a tree I don't have. And it just seems to me that if you don't align what reality with what's written on these in the data, you're going to end up with this kind of mismatch. And having local knowledge is the key to be able to pick out where the problems lie. Am I right?
Oh, very, very much so. It is a difficult one, and sometimes it's embarrassing. As Val said, we like to be known as the experts. We don't like to get anything wrong, and when we get client feedback, and not just from the solicitor that we tend to work directly with, but the client comes back and sort of says, well, actually, that's not as much. We don't believe that, because I have a tremendous one. Interesting enough, Jackie, we've got one of the guys from Hertfordshire Building Control coming on to speak on cladding matters tomorrow. Never spoken to him before, but we'll speak to him. But they've changed it. That's another story, because if you don't know what's happening, Hertfordshire sold themselves to the devil, if you like. They sold themselves, each of the 5 of the 7 councils, I think the seven councils, they sold themselves out to Hertfordshire Building Control.
Mm.
So it was no longer St Albans, Welland Garden City, or anything of that particular nature. The building control was our, and it was a big controversy when they took over, because they wanted to charge ridiculous sums of money. But that was all settled out. It was all working nicely. Everything was running smoothly. It was a very inexpensive thing to do. We paid a little bit to obviously support what they'd done. Then all of a sudden we hear, very recently, the councils have bought back. The very councils have bought back the ownership of building control. So it's no longer Hertfordshire Building Control that happens to be. So, and
that's
course,
probably why I can't get a flipping answer on the phone.
That'll be it. That'll be it.
Not easy people to work with, trust me. That is why they charge 8 times the original price. So it started off with each of the individual councils where you weren't charged, like mostly. Then it went to Hertfordshire Building Control, and we paid very little. Now we're paying sort of 8 times the price for that same information. But it was interesting. It was a Hertfordshire search, and it wasn't a local authority search. I was doing a common search, and what happened? It was sent back because the person who handles the searches, they're absolutely superb. The records they keep of the common searches are sort of second to none. And our information had actually sort of said there was no common, there wasn't a registered commons abutting the property. There was what was previously registered commons, but it had been they sort of let it go, and it was no longer the case. But in 2019, apparently the council took back ownership, and the only people who actually knew about this was the Highways Department. They hadn't told land charges. They hadn't told anybody about this particular aspect. Oh. And even DEFRA, who keep the main records on their maps and all because they map it, DEFRA do, registered commons, the majority, not all of them. And in this case, it wasn't registered commons. But it was only by actually sort of looking at it, going to the records and speaking to the speaking to the department and getting them to investigate, we found that the information had been passed through. And it's like Jackie said, many departments have to rely on the person responsible, department responsible to pop that record through. And if they're not doing it, it's not going to get there. It's not going to be right. And in some cases, as we will actually sort of find the building regulation, for example, if they're taking too long to come through, we end up with sort of properties which look to have had extensions, not many extensions actually, because they don't need building control to look at that. But it'll be various other things that go on in the part, and it looks as though something's happened, and there is no building control for it. And the reality is, it's taking a long time to get from building control into to the appropriate sort of people, to the planning department, for us to actually look at those records. But it is one of those challenges, and the advantage is, without the local knowledge, without the people knowing who to speak to when the queries come up, that is something else which, in fact, I think we're speaking about this tomorrow on our podcast.
That's right.
Tomorrow.
That's right.
One of those things which can hold up property searches, as did the Commons one. But we solved it within something like 48 hours. Had it been carried out by, if you like, a desktop, they wouldn't have known who to speak to, and it would have taken several weeks. And that shows the difference between, if you like, a personal search agent carrying out a regulated search in an area that they know, rather than an area that they don't know. And Jackie, as she says, you look at some of these councils and the way they keep their records, just unbelievable.
Well, thank you all for coming here today to share some of those stories. As I keep banging the drum, if you surround yourself with people who know not just the topics or the knowledge, but also where to find it, often it's knowing where to look, and also recognizing patterns when things don't quite match up, and it calls into question, rather than just accepting it, digging through and finding the actual truth of the situation. That is critical to this. So I say to anyone watching, these are the guys who actually go a step lower, dig in, find out what's truly going on, and it's partly because they have local knowledge. And I think that's we can't shout about that enough. Having local knowledge is critical to this kind of work. But thank you so much, Hamish. It's a good lesson. Well met. Thank you, Jackie, for bringing great stories, and of course Val with a never-ending supply of hair-raising stories there. I'm sure there's plenty more to come in the future. To all you watching, thank you for being with us. Thank you for bearing with my new teeth. But keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and in these troubled times, try and look after their mental health. Until next week, bye-bye.
Bye.